are pretty busy at the best of times, without having to deal with bubbles and online learning and trying to work your way through a mountain of DFE guidance. My name is John Coates. I'm Senior Early Help Consultant with Children and Family Service, and I'll be presenting along with Catherine Bruce from the School Improvement Service and Hayden Rees-Jones from the Safeguarding Partnership. The slides have been sent out in advance, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at those. There is quite a lot of information on them, but we will be moving through them quite quickly. So obviously do go back to them and have a look. There have been a couple of changes since the first version was sent out, but if you look in the message bar on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a link there where you can access the latest version. If for some reason you're not able to see the presentation, if you try logging out and logging back in again, that sometimes works. Alternatively, just follow that link and you could probably follow it separately on a separate screen if needed. The presentation will be in 3 parts, with the opportunity for questions in between each section, or if you prefer, you can also type any questions you've got in the sidebar and we'll pick those up as we go along. Would also be very interested in any good practice that you've got to share, because we are aware there is some fantastic work going on around the county under very difficult circumstances. So anything that you think would be useful to share with colleagues, that will be much appreciated. As we start the presentation, I'll mute all microphones just so that we limit the amount of background noise, but I'll reactivate those again when we come through to question time. And just to let you know as well that this session is being recorded, so we can make it available to anybody who has been unable to attend either of the 3 sessions. One of the benefits about virtual sessions is we don't have to worry about housekeeping responsibilities, so I'm pretty sure there'll be no fire alarms, and I'm also fairly sure you probably know where your own toilets are, so we shall move on. The purpose of today is it's to provide support to designated safeguarding leads and head teachers, and we're looking at hidden harm, and Hayden will give a definition of that in a moment. To give you an update on the Safeguarding Partnership Hidden Harm campaign, to update on strategies used by schools to make a strong contribution to concerns about hidden harm, and then to look at support and guidance available for schools, and also the role of the Children and Family Service in providing that support. And I'll pass over to Hayden, if I may, if he's there.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, everybody, I'm currently presenting this from my phone, so it's going to be a fun time trying to actually present this because my computer's failed for me. So, in terms of what Sorry, I got muted there.
Yeah, I think you've become part of the audience, Hayden. That's the problem. So if I mute the audience, I mute you as well.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of hidden harm, even though that people are living in their own homes, children and young people, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are really out of harm's way. Obviously, the current COVID situation has put increased pressures on families like never before. It's something pretty much unheard of in our recent history anyway. And children across North Yorkshire could find themselves in harmful situations which are compounded by the lockdown. Now, what I would say is that although we're doing this in light of the COVID situation, hidden harm is something that is always with us in terms of trying to identify where a child or young person is suffering. But the main reason why it's more of a concern at the moment is because children aren't going to school, they're not seeing friends, they're not interacting with professionals. So it makes it a lot harder to really pick up on the fact that there is, concerns about an individual. So the pressures of social isolation and lockdown have obviously increased the potential of harm to children and young people. This includes not only their own mental health, but the mental health of the parents. They could be exposed to exploitation, which could include online activity and other forms of abuse and harm, which can include that from peers. It could also include domestic abuse, which they may be subject of, and obviously through lockdown there is no escape from that for children and young people. And then it could be substance misuse or alcohol misuse, which may be either by them or their parents. So in terms of what the issues are, there is the NSPCC report in terms of research that has been done for the social isolation of risk of abuse during and after the COVID virus. So this was published in June 2020, and a link is on the slide there for you to be able to access that. Social isolation and obviously the risk of child abuse before and after coronavirus includes things like the increase in stresses to parents and caregivers, the increase in the children's and young people's vulnerability, and a reduction in the normal protective services, because obviously there is the exposure for the children. Children have been locked in for a lot of that time. So as well as this, there is the post that's on the right hand side there, which you can access in terms of from the NSPCC. Schools should really have in place support plans which would include reviewing support for all children currently known to the designated named or lead or safeguarding officer or child protection officer, ensuring that they identify any children who are missing from education and sharing the information timely with the local authority to ensure that they can get the care and support that they need, and putting comprehensive support in place for staff to enable them to support children confidently, which would also include training on child development and how trauma can be manifested in behaviour and problems or poor emotional regulation as well, so that professionals are able to identify these concerns. So the NSPCC has resources on disclosure, the Let Children Know You Are Listening, which can be shared in relation to that. Obviously, mental health and well-being is a priority. Mental health difficulties are presented as sort of like the main issues for both children and adults and in parents, and have heard reports of suicidal ideation as well. Obviously, comprehensive identification of a range of issues that might adversely affect a child's well-being and mental health is needed, and a bespoke plan for the first few weeks back in settings which includes inclusive approach to behaviour management. And we need good joint working with partners to ensure children are identified and receive early help and support as soon as possible. There is the video on the right hand side, which is available to watch. There's a PIN and password for that, but obviously we are looking at some of the concerns of hidden harm and adverse childhood experience. These are stressful and traumatic events which would include abuse and neglect, and they may also involve a dysfunctional household with issues such as domestic violence or growing up with family members of who have addictions to drugs and alcohol. Domestic abuse is obviously an ongoing concern. There is the IDAS service, and they've got the document there which says about COVID-19 may cause stress and upset, but it should never cause you to fear a loved one. So that's available for you to look. But they also provide training in relation to domestic abuse, which you can access, and links to that are, I believe, are available on the Safeguarding Children Board's website, as well as the IDAS services webpage. In terms of mental health, we know that 83% of young people with mental health needs have said that the coronavirus has exacerbated their mental health condition. That was done, identified from a survey of Young Minds report on the 30th of March this year. And you can look at Young Minds for the coronavirus advice and mental health support. We also have on the Safeguarding Children's Board website, we have a page dedicated to mental health guidance, which is obviously available to you. There's lots of information on there which we would encourage you to access, but also to draw the attention of to other members of your schools as well. There is also the North Yorkshire Pathway of Support for Children and Young People with Self-Harming Behaviour and or Suicidal Ideation, and you can access that document as well. There's a link at the bottom of the page there for you to be able to do that. In terms of substance misuse, we know that children living with parental problems or alcohol or drugs misuse need access to support and advice, and this can have obviously a long-lasting, devastating impact on the children and can affect them for the rest of their lives, basically, which would then translate into problems for adults later. At the moment, at the most conservative estimate, we believe that there is at least 1 in 11 children living in a situation where alcohol or drug misuse is basically known to be an issue, and an awful lot of reviews relating to children which have been done nationally have featured either drug and alcohol misuse within them. Children who are exposed to this can have difficulty in developing a trusting relationship with anyone. Their experience is that adults will let them down and that they have to do everything, even provide for themselves. And that might be why it's difficult to engage with children and young people in those circumstances. And adults working with these children can make a real significant impact on the child's positive outcomes, if they know how to do that work. Criminal exploitation remains to being a problem for children as well, and while the indicators of counterlines may have decreased during lockdown, there are also signs during this period that it's basically had created a new recruitment opportunities for gangs and the potential for a spike in renewed activities when lockdown eases, with the knowledge that children are being recruited from within the county rather than externally. So this is where it all leads into the Hidden Harm campaign. Obviously, as a Safeguarding Children's partnership, we are always concerned about how harm is hidden from professionals and how we can get that knowledge out there so that professionals are aware of that and what they should be doing. And that's why we're launching the campaign with the hashtag of Tell Us Your Concerns. You might have seen that during Safeguarding Week, which was a couple of weeks ago, where children and adult services across North Yorkshire and the City of York adopted that hashtag. And basically, communities across the whole of North Yorkshire will continue to be urged to be vigilant and to basically tell us your concerns in relation to that. I mentioned Safeguarding Week. We did actually have themes per day during Safeguarding Week, which took place on the 22nd to the 26th of June. And we looked at things like domestic abuse, keeping safe online, radicalisation, county lines of cuckooing, and mental health and well-being. There is lots of information available on our website for you to be able to access that. And if you look back at some of the tweets from the Safeguarding Children Board, there's some very good links there to resources. What I would say is, if you're a professional working in safeguarding or working with children and young people anyway, if you use Twitter, it would be a good idea to follow at NYSCP 1, and that's the board's sort of like primary way of pushing out information to anybody who's subscribed, so that you get the latest information in relation to safeguarding children. Does anybody have any questions?
We did have one question, and they put in the message you said, which was, how can children be considered missing in education if education is not compulsory?
Catherine, is there anything that you want to respond to that one?
Yes, I mean, I think I would just remind everybody of the missing in education protocols. So, you know, I'm thinking of an example where, you know, you are repeatedly trying to contact a child. It might be through online learning that you've not heard back from. You know, you've tried the family contact, you've tried the emergency contacts, and you are just not getting anywhere at all, in which case, you know, we would ask you to follow the missing in education protocols as you would normally do if you were failing to have contact with a child, because, you know, we would hope that the worst hasn't happened, but obviously there's then a whole range of actions that come into play to try and locate that child. So the missing in education protocols are on CYPS info site on the missing in education page. But I think, Hayden, there's also the protocols being updated with the Children's Safeguarding Partnership 1 minute.
Yes, in terms of missing children, not just missing in education, but just generally missing, there is a new protocol across North Yorkshire and the City of York, which has been agreed, and that is being published. But there is also, to go with that, a new 1 minute guide for anybody who's concerned that a child may have gone missing, in terms of what sort of steps that you should be undertaking in order to identify, is a child actually missing? Because you might consider them missing, but they're just not where they're supposed to be, but you might actually know where they are. So the guide goes into all of that, so that you can actually understand what sort of steps, because if a child does go missing, then it's imperative really that the correct information gets to the right people as timely as possible, because that child may have you know, for example, suicidal ideation. They might have maybe a medical condition that is particularly relevant, you know, that we need to find a child urgently, or they might be associating with you know, known criminals, that sort of thing, and could be at risk. So the new protocol actually allows us to get the information in, grade it, and launch a proportionate response in terms of the level of risk which we believe that the child might be vulnerable to.
Okay, has anybody, before I take over the presentation, anybody else got any queries or anything that they'd like to share at this point? Okay, so we'll move on, but please, you know, if you have anything, just log it in the sidebar and we will come back to you. Okay. So the next 3 slides, those of you who familiarise yourselves with the presentation, are very much about recognising hidden harm. And as Hayden says, this isn't just about, you know, COVID-19, although the current situation perhaps exacerbates it. So what I did was I just went through much of the partnership practice guidance, which most people will be familiar with, and the web link is there. And I went to the practice guidance which was particularly relevant to hidden harm, so domestic abuse, the PREVENT, working with individuals at risk of radicalisation and extremism, criminal exploitation, the county lines, the child sexual exploitation, and Hayden's already mentioned the self-harming and suicidal ideation. And then I also went back to the vulnerability checklist. So what this is about is, as you're doing your briefings for staff and the work that you are ongoing around designated safeguarding leads, is just helping people to be really familiar with and just revisit some of those possible indicators. You know, I added in the one around not completing not just homework, but the whole issue about online learning, for example. So there's ones which relate to behaviours, there's ones which relate to emotions that you may see children displaying either through the contacts that they have with you verbally or through any online streaming that you are doing, or more importantly, as children are returning to school, in the sessions that you're having. One of the things that is very clear from all the DFE guidance that's coming out is the expectation that this will be a very active process that you're engaged in. So, you know, absolutely recognising that your situation is quite different. You know, you've got the blended approach, you've got some children who are very vulnerable, who are still not yet back in school, and that's been agreed with social care, for example, but that the wording says on the returning guidance that children, staff should be actively looking for signs of harm, and that in your role with DSLs that you're actively having conversations with parents and carers, ideally before children return, so that you're picking up any concerns about welfare and safeguarding before the children arrive back at you. And of course that's to try and help you to put in some support plans, to think about whether there needs to be referrals into children and families to get that help and support to that child and family as soon as you possibly can. I think the other thing I want to flag up from the DFE guidance, and we put it in the COVID policy addendums, is that it would be absolutely perfectly appropriate for your governors to be considering how much time and resource allocation you as designated safeguarding leads and deputy designated safeguarding leads have to do this potentially additional work, you know, ongoing now, but particularly into the first few weeks of next term, as you're having more and more face-to-face contact with children and young people. So we've also, obviously, the training for deputy designated safeguarding leads who want to train up to make sure that you're confident in taking those roles. There's been some additional webinar sessions through NYS, so if anybody's got any queries about that, we'll pick that up at the end of the session. But I suppose what we're really aware of is all the work that's happening around this. And those of you who are in this Skype call, as I kind of, you know, present that slide that's in front of you now, we know that there's been very regular contact, particularly with the most vulnerable during the COVID-19 school partial closures, and that tracking, the kind of fortnightly reviews of attendance plans, keeping the communication with parents. DFE have actually produced a guidance particularly for parents and carers for the sorts of things that they need to be thinking about to help and support their children. We know that there's been a real focus around particularly emotional well-being and mental health. I think what's coming back to me when DSLs have been asking for support around briefings, we put out the DSL PowerPoint probably around June time, around sort of emerging issues and things to be thinking about, and it would be perfectly sensible to kind of grab slides from this presentation, the DSL presentation that's already on the wider opening, to help you to deliver briefings for staff, whether they're virtual briefings, Teams briefings, or face-to-face when you get back to school. But that's all about your high vigilance and identification, sharing concerns through your existing child protection procedures, just reminding people what those procedures are, who's there, who they report to, how they report, and that you're monitoring and evaluating that those are taking place. We know that there's been a really good piece of work with schools engaging virtually with children's social care, virtual care meetings, strategy review meetings. So we're thanking everybody very much for keeping that up, while things are having to work remotely. And thinking about the work that's happening, particularly around giving children time to talk. I don't know if we have Bedale High School on the call. Is Alison Knight? Can Alison just bob in the sidebar if she's in the call? I was hoping we were expecting. But what I've put on the slide here is a piece of work that was put together jointly by St Francis Xavier, Bedale High, Northallerton and Thirsk schools. Really trying to open up conversations and working with staff, because if we open up those safe spaces for children to talk, they are more likely, particularly with adults that they trust, to share things which have made them feel uncomfortable or have been, of real concern to them during this particularly difficult period of time. The other thing that on this slide here, just wanted to share some of the stuff that we know that's already going on around that kind of remote communication, and particularly through school websites. We've seen some fantastic stuff going through. I've put on here, I don't know if Moorside Primary School were with us on the call yesterday, talking about that very proactive work with children's families, about useful resources, different strategies, and again opening up those communication channels where there are concerns. Curriculum has obviously been a really difficult challenge over this period, with that blend of home and remote learning and school face-to-face. What we do know is that schools have been trying to build into that really good opportunities around curriculum safeguarding. So a lot of focus around online safety. We've also got schools reminding students about the risks around risky behaviours. And what we're seeing is, Active Think a really good set of resources being flagged up through the PSHE Association at Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4. So we would really encourage you to, as more and more children are returning, to keep those safeguarding curriculum activities going, again, to help the children, be really clear about safe, unsafe activities, and also that real heightened focus around mental health and well-being. The guidance for schools that we put out on the wider reopening website around transition back to school, that's got a really key focus around emotional well-being, including the support and guidance around bereavement, for staff, families and children that have experienced that during COVID. Virtual school are rolling out alongside the Adverse Childhood Experience resource and filming, the attachment and trauma aware training, emotion coaching, which has been extended to foster carers. So all of that work, the work through the EdPsych service, it might be partially remote, it's less likely to be face-to-face at the moment, but if you are interested and you want to pull in that additional support, please do pick up on the contacts in those resources. I did mention the child protection policy addendums. We did put 2 out, one in April, one in June. Those have wound their way onto many schools' websites, which is brilliant, which means that they've gone through governance, been shared with staff. Keeping Children Safe in Education is out for 2020 for September. It doesn't become live until the 1st of September. But just to say that we are on with the Child Protection Policy update. We are hoping that we will get that out to schools before the end of this term. It's just going through checks and approvals at the moment.
So how is Early Help supporting schools to identify and respond to hidden harm concerns? In this context, by early help, we mean early help as defined by working together to safeguard children, in that it's responding at the earliest opportunity. We're not necessarily talking about it as a service, although we will make reference to early help as a service as part of this. Hopefully everybody's familiar with the continuum of need, which is divided into 4 sections. Level 1 is the green on the diagram, which is universal, which is those children who come to school, they get on well, they attend the doctors when they need to do, and so on, and don't really require much in the way of additional help. Level 2, which I'll come back to in a moment, is the yellow part, and then level 3 is the orange, which is child in need, and then level 4 is the ready pink bit on there, which is child protection. At level 2, we're looking at being divided into 3 sections. There's 2A, which is a single agency, which in your case would be for schools, where you would complete an early help assessment to identify need and offer support to a child. And that will be possibly with the support from ourselves as early help consultants. But primarily the school will be responding to any identified needs and actually putting a plan in place to support those. Team B would be where the issue is perhaps a little bit more complicated and there are other agencies involved. So the school would pull together a team around the family meeting. And again, we can support and advise you on that process. And then 2C will be where issues are such that actually the school as a single agency is not in a position perhaps to support the family. And so referral is put through for a children and family worker through into early help, using the early help assessment as a referral form or the universal referral form. So the early help assessment that I've just referred to, it's based on the signs of safety model, which means that it's a strength-based approach. So it focuses on not only on what's the problem that's presenting itself, but also on what's working well, what other support mechanisms might be in place, what has worked well in the past, and so on. The idea is that it's completed as soon as possible, as soon as problems emerge or they're identified, with a view to putting support or plans in place as quickly as possible to prevent escalation. In that sense, if you have children returning to school in September and there have been issues around some of the hidden harm things that have been mentioned, it's potentially a good tool to assess what's been going on and what can be put in place. If it's not possible to manage the issues at school level, then the form can be used as a referral. If you're doing so, then we suggest that you speak to your early help consultant first, and then it can be put through as a referral. But the more information that is included on the form, obviously, the more helpful that is when it comes to screening. If the issues arising are at a level that you believe may be safeguarding child protection level, then the universal referral form can still be used, because obviously you wouldn't be going around completing an early help assessment if there was a need for an imminent response. The contacts for early help, and I say we're quite happy to talk through referrals or any concerns that you've got around hidden harm or around general safeguarding issues. The names are on there. So we've got schools here from all across the county. But if you can contact whoever is your local one on one of the duty centre numbers that are listed on there, then we're quite happy to talk things through, or if circumstances permit, to come out and visit and to talk through in person. Needless to say, social care have continued to work with children and families throughout lockdown and beyond, either at level 3 or level 4, so that's child in need level or child protection level. They've worked closely with Children's Safeguarding Partnership to raise awareness around hidden harm, but also the visits and interventions have continued directly with families. And one of the things that they've been looking at is attendance plans for children to get them back into school. Now, this may, alongside the early help assessment, be a good plan to use when you are trying to get children back into school, because for various reasons, whether it's to do with hidden harm or whether it's just due to the fact that they've been off for a long period, I imagine that some children will find it difficult resuming normal education in a formal setting. And I think we're back to Hayden at this point.
I just wonder whether we should just pick up the sidebar Anna raised about child being able to talk in private. So I think, this is something, and I don't know if you're the designated safeguarding lead, but, that's something where obviously you follow your child protection policy to the letter as you would in any other circumstance. So thinking about, where you would need to have a conversation with the child and the usual things about not promising confidentiality and so on. But it would be perfectly appropriate not to be having that conversation with other adults and children in the room. So if you want to stay on the call, just at the end, we can maybe have a talk about your particular situation and whether you've got, real constraints on your site, etc. at the moment to find that space, or if you're talking about a remote conversation that you want to have. So, Anna, if you can just stay on the Skype just for a few minutes at the end, we can pick that up. Over to you, Hayden.
Thank you. So, in terms of the Hidden Harm campaign, obviously we've been doing these twilight sessions. This is the last of the 3 sessions across East, West and Central. All of the information that you need in terms of hidden harm is really available from our website. Obviously, hidden harm will be a theme for the head teacher at designated safeguarding leads network meetings in the autumn term. We would urge everyone to sign up to our e-bulletin as well. If you go onto our website, there's actually a link on the home page that you can sign up for that. We send out information monthly, sort of like bite-sized chunks that you can absorb information from. In terms of future hidden harm, there is we're looking at doing a hidden harm posters. We're looking at doing a video which will be hopefully available from the September term, the beginning of that, in relation to that, which you can then cascade across your schools. There's a lot of new hidden harm sort of like 1-minute guides or 1-minute guides that relate to hidden harm. So we've got the parental mental ill health, and that one links to the use of the PAMIC tool as well. We've got prevent extremism and radicalisation, make crime, stalking protection orders, and forced marriage. All of those are brand new ones. Then we have an updated county lines one, which also takes into account cuckooing. We've got updates on the female genital mutilation guide. Historically, this has been about the time where FGM has actually started to raise its very ugly head in terms of risks to young girls. Obviously, with the flight restrictions now, it's unlikely that a child would be taken to one of the countries that practice FGM, but that does not necessarily mean that it might still be practiced in this country if they can't take a child somewhere else. So for those people who are from cultures where that is a persistent risk, you just need to be cognizant of that as well. We've also got information on information sharing, and when do you need consent, when don't you need to consent, and all of that sort of stuff. There is the a campaign ongoing as well in terms of intelligence sharing, so using the partners information sharing form so that you notify the police, and if there is concern, we would say not only should you notify the local authority, but should also notify the police if there's any involvement required for the police. And then we've also got a guidance in terms of social media and professionals, which is basically how should you use social media when you're a professional, just some guidance to really try and help steer people away from a lot of the pitfalls. There's also the national campaign about if you think about it, report it. No child should or adult should be made to feel unsafe, and everyone has a right to be safe from harm and abuse. And all of us have a role to play in safeguarding, because safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. So, you know, never more so than during COVID-19. And so if you look at the Tackling Child Abuse campaign website, the link's there as well. But what we would say is, if your school or you're, you know of a child who is maybe contacted Childline or whatever, these things need to come into the local authority. Just because they're reported to a more national campaign or a national group doesn't always mean that they always get transcribed back to us. So in order for us to be able to take any action, we need to know about these things, so that any messages, you know, should be going to the local authority. And that's it. Just like to thank everybody for the time, and if they've got any more questions.
We got a question coming in. There was somebody on the telephone. It's been really useful looking through the sidebar at, you know, the sort of things that everybody's doing in their own individual schools. And I think it's really helpful. We've got schools of every size. We've got secondary, we've got special, we've got primary schools on the call. It would be absolutely brilliant if there's something that you think actually is working pretty well for you at the moment. If you are happy to mention that, that would be really helpful. Are we sending out the PowerPoint? We're not going to send it out again. The wider reopening CYPS link right up at the top gives you where this version of the presentation is. What we found is that because we don't have everybody's email addresses, we're sending it to school admin addresses, and that's not necessarily getting to you as designated safeguarding lead. So we think the safest way is to put it on the CYPS info site where everybody's got access to that. If you've got a struggle getting to it, then I'm happy to send it out to you, but I'll put my email address on the side here. And there it goes. So and I just want to say something about designated safeguarding networks next term, that the hidden harm will absolutely be a theme within those. They've run pretty well this year. They're the half-day designated safeguarding lead head teacher networks. They are almost certainly going to be online or kind of webinar based next term. But if you can keep an eye out for those on NYS, the dates haven't been set yet, but they will move into next term as well. So hopefully that will be another time to come up back together as designated safeguarding leads.
We will stay online after the end of the session if anybody wants to stop on for a chat or raise a particular issue. Just before we conclude, just for everybody, can I also say that Catherine will be retiring in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So this is actually a final presentation to schools. So I'm sure everybody would like to join me in wishing her well for the future.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you.
And you've been recorded on that, so it's official.
Oh my God. Switch it off.
Okay, unless there's any more questions, do feel free to leave, but we will stay around if there's any other questions you want to ask.
Okay, thank you, everybody.